Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Everyday Strong with Dr. Michael G. Daniels. This is your host, CB Baker. We're going to do a continuation of our financial freedom series. And today's topic is basically climbing out of the hole and in your financial well-being, whether you're at the top or at the bottom, peak or valley. But we're going to talk about now coming from the peak. I mean, not from the peak, coming from the valley and getting back to the peak and what happens in between there.
Sure.
The trials and tribulations, and then we'll talk about how you'll start doubting yourself sometimes, and God forbid, start doubting God's plan. You know, so and I know from the pulpit, Dr. Daniels, you'll talk about that a lot.
Right.
And keeping that faith. So let's dive into it, Dr. Daniels. So before we started the podcast, we was talking about, and I was telling you, for my business aspect and mental health, everything is a lot of challenges going on right now. And I told you, I said, well, the funny thing is everything that you said to me that could happen or would happen actually has happened. So, and it's been challenging. And then you broke something down to me that I want you to break down for the listeners here. So break it down to me of how you could look at things.
Sure. Let's do this if you don't mind. And we said, in case we have some people who are viewing this for the first time, so let me go back and quickly first recap what brought us to this point. You know, it won't take but a second. Because the question, has come up oftentimes, and people often ask, well, what does the Bible say about becoming financially free, and how are we going to, get to that point in our life? And there's several places where you can find this, but there are two that, in my opinion, two particular scriptures that people ought to take, most heed to. One is an issue where Joseph, and this is in Genesis, where there is a Pharaoh that has a dream, and he has his dream is that there are 7 fat cows and there are 7 skinny cows, and the 7 skinny cows come and they eat up the 7 fat cows, but they remain skinny. Then he dreams that there are 7 fat ears of corn and 7 skinny ears of corn. The 7 skinny ears of corn come, they eat the 7 fat ears of corn, and they remain skinny, even though they've eaten the fat ears of corn. So he can't find anyone to interpret the dream. And so someone tells him that there is one who's a Hebrew named Joseph that can. And so Joseph tells him a couple of things that leads right into what you just talked about just now. One, he said that the fat cows and the fat ears of corn mean that there are going to be 7 good years. And the fact that he dreamed that there were fat cows and fat corn says that God was really trying to tell him something, because it was, I'm telling you the same thing twice, but telling you 2 different ways. Now, if you note that the 7 skinny cows ate the 7 fat cows and remained skinny. The 7 skinny ears of corn ate the 7 fat ears of corn and remained skinny, which meant that the bad times were going to be so rough that even though they took what you had got in the good years, you would still feel yourself like you were in a negative place,
right.
And that's why they didn't get any better. So what Joseph told the Pharaoh was, in order to mitigate that situation, to set yourself up so that you are living off, you are saving 1/5 of all that comes in, which equates to, if I'm saving 1/5, as we know mathematically, that says I'm living off of 4/5, which is 80%.
Right.
So the concept is I'm going to live off 80% of my income. That's the concept. And let me say this, because I know a lot of people out here right now that are not doing that and are questioning how to do that. How can I get to living off 80% of my income? Well, what you have to do is you have to look at, what is my discretionary spending and what is my, mandatory spending. I mean, that's basically. And I don't care what income bracket you're in, we all have that, mandatory and discretionary spending.
Yes.
But we have to clearly identify what is mandatory and what is discretionary. And to give you an example, Most people presume that their cable bill is mandatory or their
Right.
satellite bill is mandatory,
Right.
but it is not a mandatory bill.
Right.
It is a discretionary spending. And so if for example I am not at that point, then I may have to decide that rather than watching TV, I read a book. Because here's what we know: two things. Number one is that I will become a more well-rounded person if I'm reading as opposed to watching TV, and so will my children. So if I'm going to save money, and some people think the opposite, that I don't want to deny my children TV. Well, some of the best things you can do is deny your children TV.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And say, read a book, study, and because you really get a better world view by reading than you do from watching television.
Yeah.
Okay. So it is a simple thing, right? That one can do. So once you get down to that 80%, now the Bible then tells us that because of who we are, because we belong to God, that we should reserve 10% and tithe 10%. So I'm living off 80, I'm banking 10, and that's my investment for my future. And I am giving God 10 because that, is his requirement to, in fact, there's a text that says this: will a man rob God? But yet ye have robbed me in tithes and offerings. And he says, bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now here with the Lord of hosts, if I will not pour you out, open up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. Then he says, and I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes. Okay. So what that text is saying is that most of us feel like when we don't tithe in our hearts and minds that we are not stealing from God. That's why he said, you say, wherein have you robbed me? Because our concept is it don't belong to you, God, it belongs to us. But God is saying, no, it does belong to me. I gave it to you, so it belongs to me. And I gave it to you, and I'm just asking you to return back unto me to show your appreciation for what I have done for you. So he says that when you do that, I will open up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing. And one of the things he says I will do is I will rebuke the devourer for your sakes, right? And what he said to them was that their crops would prosper, right? Those kind of things. So they would not have an issue with their business dealings, which what he's saying basically is if you do that for me, I will make sure that which you do always prospers, even in lean times. That you may not go forward, but you won't go down. So let's say a person does not have a business, for example. If he's rebuking the devourer for your sake, that means that your car won't break down because, you won't have a bill that other folk may have.
Right.
Your car going to last longer. Your refrigerator's going to last longer. All those things are going to last longer until you get back to until those 7 bad years are over with, or whatever that period of time is that you're going through. So I just want to get a little background so folk would kind of see, how we got to where we were.
Right.
So the question then becomes, as you said, what if I'm in that? What if I have done all that? I've done exactly what the Bible says do, and now I'm in a bad turn. I'm in a bad place. Well, the reason why he told us to put that 10% away, number one,
right,
was because he's saying bad times are going to come. Mm-hmm. Now, if I have done that for a period of time, let's say, I'm really not in a bad place. Now, I may not like the place I'm in, but I'm not in a bad place. Because if I have done that for, let's say, 10 years, then I have equivalent to a full year of my normal income, right, just somewhere waiting with nothing to do.
Right.
So that means, if nothing else, I got a full year of income to deal with my situation.
Right. That's right.
Which for most people ought to get you out.
Right.
Right. Think about it. But the other thing too is this: it is how I look at climbing out, right? And that's what you and I just talked about. I can look at climbing out as a problem. I can look at climbing out as a challenge, and so it depends on how I look at it. Now, when most of us are in the process of gaining, and building ourselves up, we don't look at it as a problem. Mm-hmm. We look at it as a challenge. See, if you start at zero and you work hard to obtain something, you don't be thinking to yourself, this is the worst thing that could have happened to me.
Right.
you look at it like, okay, I'm working harder and I'm getting a return from it, and it's a challenge to you. And we see the problems as an opportunity to do some things. Now, from a business perspective, and I don't know what everybody's business dealings are, their work thing, but from a business perspective, it's what I have found. Sometimes, and the Israelites face the same issue, sometimes we miss opportunity because we are too stubborn to move,
Yes.
right? And so sometimes the only way we're going to move is if God puts us in a place where we have no choice but to move. So let's say I'm doing everything the Lord told me to do, but I'm facing some difficult things in my life. Well, perhaps it is because God is trying to push you to your right, but you're so used to going straight ahead, you won't go.
Right.
So the only way God get you to move right is to block everything straight ahead, to force you to go right. Okay. And I'll use myself as an example. I had always said to my wife and to close friends that I want to retire at the age of 45. And everything I had did in my life up to that point was to put myself in a position so at 45 I could walk away from the federal government and not have to worry about anything.
Right.
Now, I get to 45, and by now I am, I'm I'm in executive management in the federal government.
Right.
I'm sitting back. I'm
Right.
I'm what we call living the life.
Right.
And I don't want to go nowhere now because in my mind it's like, whoa. As like my wife said to me, well, why would you want to walk away now? You finally got where you want to go. Okay. If purity hell did not break out, let me tell you. And I mean purity hell broke out. And I could not understand why my God would have me going through all this hell. Why I had to be dealing with all this stuff at this point in my life when I finally reached that pinnacle of success, as an executive in the federal government. And so one day I'm sitting there, I'm behind my desk, and I was listening to a song on the radio. And what the song told the story of was the Israelites going through the wilderness to get to the promised land, and how they was complaining going through the wilderness to get to the promised land. And the commentator said this, isn't it how crazy how we'll ask God to get us to the promised land, but we'll fight hard to go back to where we came from. Because they complained. They kept saying, right, Lord, why did you bring me out here in this wilderness for us to die? Because they were complaining as he was leading them to the promised land, because they had to go through some stuff to get there. Right. And it dawned on me. So most of my career, I've been praying, Lord, position me so I can retire at 45. And here I am at 47, and I don't want to do what I've been praying God let me do. Right. And now you got me at a place where I'm so sick of these folk at this federal government, I'm putting my papers in. Right. And I did it. And you know what? Haven't missed a beat. Because in my mind, in my wife's mind, it was like, don't you leave that income. Don't you do it. Don't you do it. Don't you do it. I did it, and I am more prosperous now than I have ever been in my life. Not necessarily because I have more money coming in, but because I have more things coming my way. Right. And that's the key, is that I may not have the money, but I have more of what money can buy. Right. Because I've received that favor from God by doing what he told me to do. So I'm here to say this, that I felt like at that time, I was about to lose my mind. I felt like I could not make it. I felt like God had abandoned me, because I just couldn't understand, why would you have these people that were lying on you, people that are, doing all these diabolical things to ruin your reputation and to ruin your life. Why would you have them doing that? I've been a good person. I've worked hard. I'm, reasonably good folk. Right. And then as soon as I walked away from the federal government, the light bulb went off. It's the best thing you could have ever done. Right. Right. So I guess I'm saying that just to say it depends on the perspective. You never know where God is trying to push you. But if you keep trying to go where you are, maybe the blessing you've been praying for, he's trying to get you to see, hey, you know what? You asked me for it, right, but you don't want to take what I'm giving you. Right. So I got to push you to take it, because you won't take it the way you asked me.
And in my situation, I spent probably 20 years studying the subject of leadership and motivation and stuff. And when the first wave for the business and mental health industry, with all these new MCOs and there's a lot of changes happening, somebody asked me, it was like, so how you dealing with it? I said, well, the ironic thing is I'm prepared mentally for it.
Mm-hmm.
I just never had to actually use the stuff that I have studied and tried on little things here and there, but I never actually had to use it to where it's game time.
Right.
So, but I said I'm using it, and this is what I was telling you before. But what's not in the brochure, Pastor, was that climb or the climb back up the mountain or the walk through the wilderness. It's what's not in there is the bear over here in the corner, the snake over here, the tigers and everything that you're in the forest or in that jungle, and all you have is that voice, the voice of God saying, turn left, turn right. And then when you turn left, there's still something here. It's like it's what I look at it, Pastor, is almost like somewhat of a test. It's like, this is what you asked for. How are you going to put faith in me that I'm going to pull you out this situation? And then I've prepared you. Now you're prepared. You got the tools that you need, right? The last tool that you got to have is me in order to make it through.
Right.
That's how I feel in the situation. And I'm seeing the light at the end of the tunnel because I'm following the plan.
Right.
But it's like, it's hard to get there if, like, I have the pleasure of sitting with my pastor every week. You know what I'm saying? So I have that opportunity.
Right.
A lot of people out there don't have that opportunity that's going through the same things. When God tells them to turn left, they turn left, and then they see all this other stuff happening. And it's like, how do you get past that doubt?
Right. That's a good point. It's a good question. And I'll say this, that uncertainty is not just something that you feel if you are not grounded in the word. Biblically, most of the patriarchs at points in their time, had that same kind of uncertainty and that same kind of doubt. David had his issues, right? And in fact, we often say, and I've heard preachers talk about that concept of how to turn a test into a testimony. Because if you think about all the patriarchs in the Bible, there was a period of doubt. And you think about when the apostles were with Christ and they find themselves on a ship. And these are seasoned fishermen, okay? They're seasoned fishermen. And they find themselves on the ship when Christ is not with them on the boat. And all of a sudden a storm brews up. And the storm is so terrible that in their minds, they're going to perish, that they're going to die. And when Jesus gets back to them, he says to them, "Oh, ye of little faith, why would you doubt? Why do you think I would let you perish? Why would I do that to you? Why would I send you to the other side of the sea if I thought sending you to the other side was going to cause you to die?"
Right.
Now, he said, "I never told you that you wouldn't have the storm going to the other side, but I did tell you to go to the other side."
Right.
So if I told you to do it, that meant that I was going to make sure you made it, right? And I think that really is how life is, right? Is that, sometimes our assumption is if we do what God tells us to do, it means that we will not face a storm,
Right.
But that doesn't mean you won't face a storm.
Exactly.
And in fact, the irony of life is this. Everyone faces storms. The Bible says it rains on the just as well as the unjust, right? So everyone faces storms. And when I did not know God, I still faced storms. It wasn't like that life just stopped happening and everything was beautiful. The difference is when I face a storm with God, here's what I know. That he has already made a way for my escape. That's what I know. When I face a storm with God, here's what I know. It is a pathway to a better me, not a pathway to a worse me. So those are the things that I know. And that's where my faith is so vitally important, is to understand that. Now, so how does one accrue that faith? That's the other thing, right? Is that, like you said, well, when I'm going through, that was not in the brochure.
Right.
Well, I'll put it to you, I'll say this. It was in the brochure, it was in the fine print. We just didn't read it. Okay. Here's why I say that. Jesus said specifically, if they did it to me,
Right.
they will do it to you, right?
Yeah.
If the devil attacked me, what makes you immune to the devil?
Right.
You know, so
Right.
it's in the brochure. It's in the fine print. No one likes to read the fine print. You know, you like I said, you've read the Old Testament now, so you know where God put them through at times, right? It's in there.
Right.
We just don't think about, well, wait a minute, am I going to be in the wilderness too?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to be thirsty and need water from a rock? Am I going to be hungry and, you know, and need manna? Think about the wilderness journey. They had to eat manna, right? Which was kind of like eating soybeans, right? Or something along those lines, that when you ground it up, you can make bread out of it. And what if you ate that for 40 years?
Yes, that would be rough.
It's rough, right? But so it's not like the story isn't in there.
Right.
It's that we don't digest it that way. But again, still, your question is still a valid question. So what do I do? Faith is what you get from experience, right? The Hebrew writers put it this way. When I examine where I have come from, when I look where God has brought me, if I forget my past, then that will cause me to lose my faith. If I can remember my past and where I have been down before, and I have always succeeded, that God has always delivered me, I don't care where it was at. And you mentioned the playbook, for example, and you said, you know, now I have to what I have practiced, now it is time to get in the game with.
Right.
Well, practice is never as tough as the game, even though the coaches try to simulate the game through practice. It is never as tough as the game.
Right.
But it is there to prepare me for the game. Now, when I get in the game, I have one of two choices. I can say, you didn't prepare me hard enough, therefore I'm going to give up and not play. Yeah. If I give up and not play, I have lost the game.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Automatically,
I've lost the game. And you and those of you who watch football games, you have seen teams. I'll give you a good example. When the Indianapolis Colts played the Kansas City Chiefs, it was evident. It was evident in the first quarter that they mentally they weren't there. They gave up in the first quarter. Okay, it wasn't that they were not prepared. They had one of the best quarterbacks in the league, right? They had one of the best running backs in the league. He was averaging over 7 yards a carry during the playoff period.
Right.
It wasn't that. It wasn't that they didn't have a good coach. It's that they gave up. Now, they had practiced hard, but they didn't play thinking they could win, and therefore they lost.
Right.
It's the same thing about life. Like you said, you know, we've gone through the stuff. We've gone through the learning period, managing the plays, learning the plays, and having the mock practice and trying to simulate what it's going to be like when we have to get in the game. But when you're in the game, if you expect the game to be less difficult than the practice, then that's what throws you for a loop. Mm-hmm. Because now you feel like, wow, I can't take this anymore. But faith is not expecting that. Faith is expecting the game to be tougher than the practice, but knowing I got the best coach.
Right. Right.
You know.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And when I coach people personally and in business, I equate everything to my sports background, and I come up with a game plan. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people may not know this when they're watching sports, but a lot of the game plan is what if this, then that.
Sure.
So meaning that if this happens, I do this. If this happens, but you write it down. So you get it out of your head. Mm-hmm. You get it on a piece of paper. Mm-hmm. And if you watched any sports at all, there's somebody either with a clipboard and you see this little scribble up there, or you see somebody with a laminated sheet with front and back, and that's all the what ifs. If this happens, do this. Mm-hmm. The ironic thing now in the Bible is life's playbook. Mm-hmm. Now, I will say out of what is like 1,500 pages that you got to look through to find, to get your stuff together, But still, you could go into the Bible, look at certain scenarios, and Google it, and then create your own playbook of if this happens, this is what I need to do.
Right.
And then don't question it. And that's one of the biggest things that I got to deal with because I'm a logical thinking person is not questioning it. If it doesn't make sense, sometimes it's like, it don't make any sense. But you know what? Let me just do it anyway because all I care about is the result. It's like if I want the result, why should I care if it don't make sense to me right now?
Absolutely. And I'll give you an old school example of that. And I know this is going to be going back a few years, but I'm gonna use the same analogy you use. When the Colts were still had Peyton Manning as quarterback, and they were down like 23 points in the fourth quarter in the AFC Championship game. Okay, now your logical thinking is simple. We're 23 down. We're in the fourth quarter. We got Peyton Manning. We're gonna throw the ball, right? That's logical thinking. And just as you said, they had already had in their playbook and in their mind, they already practiced all the different scenarios, okay? And so they get to the line of scrimmage, and let me back up. Before they get to the line of scrimmage, Marvin Harrison, who's a wide receiver, Peyton Manning says, come to him and says, run the ball. And you know, there's not a wide receiver anywhere that's thinking run the ball, because they're thinking it's pass the ball. Logically, it doesn't make sense, right? But Peyton Manning said, coming from Marvin, that meant, you know what? He sees something I don't see. He gets to the line of scrimmage and he changes the play. Even though the defense is set up to protect against the run, he changes the play and runs it anyway. And the guy gets through the line because they had that eight men up in the box.
Right.
As soon as he got through the 8-man box, what's behind him?
Nothing
but daylight. Nothing but daylight.
Right.
So the Bible, the Bible is a similar situation. See, Marvin for some reason saw what nobody else saw.
Right.
A breakdown in the defensive line. They didn't see that, but Marvin saw it.
Right.
Okay. Now, here's what the Bible, in Deuteronomy 29, in the 29th chapter, God says this: the secret things belong to the Lord, which means you may not see the secret thing. You may not see the breakdown in the line.
Right.
You know, we may not. So to us, it may not make sense, but to Marvin, it made perfectly good sense. To God, what He's telling us to do is logical. It makes perfectly good sense. We just can't see what He can see.
Right.
We can't see the future, just like they couldn't see that lineman was gassed.
Right. Right. That's right.
You know.
You're absolutely right on that.
And so when we follow the plan, when we go through and follow God's plan, what happens is we are guaranteed victory. That's what His word says. If you do it, I will. It didn't say I might. It said I will rebuke the devourer for your sake. Meaning that I will take care of it for you. I will do it for you. And here's another irony of it. You know, and I know that there are people out there right now that are afraid to do one simple thing, that's tithe. I know they are, because I used to be afraid to do it myself, afraid to do it. Here's the thing. If you ask anybody who tithes, here's what they'll tell you. Before I did it, I didn't know how it was going to work. After I did it, I got more than I've ever had. My income didn't increase. They'll tell you something like that, but I got more than I ever had. The irony of it is this: they'll listen to those testimonies and still won't follow what those testimonies suggest.
Right. And what's funny, in situations like that, you'll be sitting there looking at let's say a 32-inch TV. Boy, I would love to have me one of them 65-inch TVs. But I can't go get it because I got a tithe. But then what happens, you go tithe, and then you go sit down, then the paper comes. The TV you was looking at is marked down past the price of what you tied. He's like, well, now I can afford the TV.
Right.
It's like it's little things like that you don't really pay attention to that happens.
And it does it all the time. And I'll tell you that, not only that, here's another thing I'll tell you, is that people will have testimony from their friends about how tithing works, and they won't tithe. But then they'll hear something on TV about how to get financially secure, and they'll follow that.
Right.
and then get mad because it didn't work.
Right.
You know, or they'll buy a book from an author that his sole purpose of selling the book is so he can make money.
Right.
You know, and because had that been for him selling the book, he wouldn't be making money.
Right.
That's
right.
But you got another book.
But no, I'm gonna take it a step further.
That's proven, right?
I'm taking it a step further. You got the MBA, right?
Yes.
And what is it in?
It's in management.
In
right?
management.
With an emphasis in economics.
In economics. So your pastor got an MBA with emphasis in economics. And if you follow the Bible. So if you got any questions, all you gotta do is hit pastor up. Sometimes the solution be so simple that we just miss it.
And many of the business, many of the business models are based after the Bible.
Yeah.
Now, when the business model conflicts with the Bible, and there are some that do that, let me say that. When the business models that I learned conflict with the Bible, I used to go with the business model I learned. What I found is that it didn't work. So now I always go with the business model of the Bible. Always. If there's a conflict, I always go with the Bible. You know, for example, give you a quick business model. And I know everybody out there that we're talking about financial freedom about may not have this as an issue, but just as an example. You know, here's what we know, that when you're dealing with resources, right? You know, we always say that you got land, right? You got capital, and you got human resources. Those are the basic resources you have from an economic standpoint, right? And we always say that our most valuable resource is human capital. That's what we always say, right? Well, think about this for a minute. What did Jesus tell the apostles? The same thing. See, Jesus, he got them together, right? And the Bible says he taught them. He taught them, they had OJT, and he sent them out to put it in practice what he had taught them. Then he called them back to him, and he said, now tell me how it worked. And then he told them why what they did or did not work. So they kept, they learned, and they go back out, then they got it right. And then once he left, he said, now you're ready.
Right.
Now you're ready. And then he left and they were on their own.
And franchising.
Right.
The first version
Bingo.
right.
Bingo. And so now what? Each one of them went to their separate location. They were assigned a location to take care of. They did that, and then they did the same thing. They apostolized people, and then they sent them out to locations. And so it spread. Boom, boom, boom. It was the fastest spreading religion we have ever known. Okay? Same concept, similar concept. Now I can tell you this. We in the business community say that we believe that concept. There's not a businessman, I shouldn't say there's not a businessman, but most business people do not really think their human capital is their most valuable asset.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Right now they're fighting, they won the battle too, to not increase minimum wage in the state of Virginia to $15.
Right.
Why did they fight against it? Because they didn't think their human capital was their most valuable asset.
Right.
If they did, they would have gladly made it $15 an hour as minimum wage without it having to go through legislation. Right?
Right.
But I tell you what, none of those businessmen will say, I'm not going to buy this property. None of those businessmen will not look to get a 5% return on an investment. Right? They'll get a 1% return because all they want to do is beat inflation.
Right.
So if the inflation rate is 3%, if I'm getting 4%, I'm winning.
Right.
Right? But they act like giving employees that live with a raise won't get them a better investment. When you think of turnover, if I get turnover, if my rate of turnover is every 2 years, I'm losing money. And when you pay a minimum wage, your turnover is like every 6 to 9 months.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Right? So I'm just saying, see, that's a biblical principle that we don't apply. When we know, even from our business learning, that is something that you should invest in.
So now, one thing too, for the people that's listening, that if you don't own a business and you're working for a business, take a look at their business model. Is it following what the Bible says? And that will let you know whether or not it's either time for you to leave or stay where you at. Because you could be saying, I don't like this, I don't like this position, I don't like this job. But if they're following the Bible, okay, maybe I should stay here versus going over there where I know they're not following the principles of the Bible.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more.
Burger King versus Chick-Fil-A.
Right. I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely. Because that two things. Number one, the one that's following the Bible, they're going to be more profitable.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to take care of their employees better, right? And in the long run, you're going to win. You're going to win. Perfect example what you gave, Burger King, Chick-Fil-A. Look where Burger King's stock is now. Look where Chick-fil-A stock is now.
Right.
Chick-fil-A does not open on Sundays.
On Sundays.
Burger King don't want to ever close because
Right.
they're afraid of losing $1.
Right.
But the guy that owns Chick-fil-A understands something that the Bible says, I will rebuke the devourer for your sake. I will make sure that you prosper. And that's the principle that he's going by. And you can drive by any Chick-fil-A any time of day, and you got to stand in line.
Mm-hmm.
You can go by the every Burger King any time of day, and
you right there at the door.
You right there getting in.
Right.
So again, but and that's the thing. So
we see the examples every day
mm-hmm.
of what you should do financially
mm-hmm.
through business or personal life. And another thing too, Pastor, I want to make sure everybody understands that just because the more money you have, if your cash flow is still tight,
mm-hmm.
if you got $1 million every month and your cash flow is you got $990,000,
mm-hmm.
And you only got $10,000 to pay your bills with, and you got $20,000 worth of bills,
mm-hmm.
you're in the same boat as somebody just getting $1,500 a month. So
Absolutely.
it's not. Now, granted, the person, it might be a little bit more comfortable where they're at, lifestyle wise, but it's the same mental aspect on somebody going through it if they're supposedly wealthy versus somebody in the
mm-hmm.
Lower middle class. And then I was listening to this thing, and this person asked this guy that's rich. He said, "Man, it must be nice walking in a house like that, looking at his cars and all that stuff." And the guy said to him, after about 6 months, you get used to this.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes your house.
Mm-hmm.
That Rolls Royce or that Bentley is just a car.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going after more deeper things. He was talking, he was more a religious guy. He said, I'm going to connection with God
mm-hmm.
and being more holistic for myself because I know all this other stuff don't really mean nothing. It's nice to have, but after 6 months, it becomes normal.
Right.
So for the people that's out there that are, striving to have this and have that, have the big house and all this other stuff, let me tell you something. You want a big house. The bigger the house, the more you got to clean.
Absolutely. And I not only that. Let me. And I'm just echoing what you're saying. Is that again? I'm just going back to how do I get started? How do I get to that basic principle
mm-hmm.
of living off 80%? Right? How do I do that? Well, a lot of times that car payment is a little bit too much, so I can't do that 80% rule.
Right.
Here's the deal. Here's what my father always taught me. He said, when you're inside the car, you can't see the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't drive their car from the outside. They drive their car from the inside. He said, so how your car looks is not for your benefit. It's for the people in the world benefit because they're the ones looking at you when you drive.
Mm-hmm.
He said, why would you spend all that money just so somebody else can be happy that you're driving the car?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because the bottom line, when you're inside the car, here's what you need. Air conditioning,
mm-hmm.
heat,
right,
and if you like some music, some form of music.
Right.
Now, I can get that without spending $90,000.
Yeah.
That's about, I can get a comfortable car without spending money. Now, if you have it, then you do it, right? Because that's your thing. But the bottom line is when you're inside the car, you really have no clue what the outside looks like because you're inside the car.
That's right.
The same thing about, let's say, a house. 2,000 versus 4,000 square feet. How many rooms am I actually going to live in?
Mm-hmm.
Really, how often do people with dining rooms eat in the dining room?
Right.
I can tell you, I haven't eaten in my dining room not one time in 2018.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the only time we ate in here was Thanksgiving.
Right. If company come over, right?
Right.
Because most of us eat in the kitchen like we did when we were kids.
Right. That's right.
Or you eat, watching the TV or something along those lines.
Right.
You can't sleep. You don't sleep in but one bedroom. It's not like you sleep in one bedroom this day and then one bedroom the next day and one bedroom the next day. We don't do all that, right? So that's the thing, is that the Bible doesn't say God will supply your every want. It says God will supply your every need. And so, so that's what I should be concerned about, because getting wants don't necessarily make one happy. You're not happier with a 4,000 square foot house. you just have a 4,000 square foot house. It don't mean your marriage is better.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean your kids are smarter. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. Driving a Bentley or driving a Chevy doesn't mean that all of a sudden, your kids are more intelligent, they're going to graduate from college.
That's right.
It doesn't. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden your wife is going to come home and cook breakfast and cook lunch and cook dinner and clean the house. It doesn't mean that. As a matter of fact, it probably means it less. because like as you said, the bigger the house, the less likely she's going to clean that whole house.
Right.
So, I think that's the thing that we have to look at, as well as that, am I trying to be happy based on a false narrative? So am I trying to gain it with the assumption that gaining will make me happy? If my mother said to me a while back, because there used to be a point in my life when I worked 3 jobs, and she said, "Why are you working 3 jobs?" And I said, "Because I'm trying to get this and trying to get that." She said, "But by the time you get it, you're not going to be able to enjoy it because your body going to be broke down. Why aren't you not just enjoying where you are right now rather than continually trying to get more? You don't even enjoy what you have." She was absolutely correct. I was not enjoying things. My family was not enjoying me because I was never home.
Right.
I was always gone trying to
And then
make
when you was home,
$1.
you was tired.
I'm just as irritable as I can be. I would come home and I would yell at the kids, "Y'all, cut all that noise out.
Right.
Get upstairs." And Debbie would say, my wife would say to me, "Well, isn't it their house too? Shouldn't they be able to enjoy the house just like, did you buy the house just so we could look at it? Or did you buy the house so they could enjoy the house?" Because I was so irritable because I was, working so much. And so what they said was absolutely true, is that, see, when you get back to what really matters in life, what really matters in life, it changes your scope. And so then you can say, well, listen, am I trying to make more money to get to 80-20? Why don't I just reduce my expenses to get to 80-20? And then once I reduce my expenses, let me go ahead and invest the way the Bible tells me to invest. That way, I know it's going to come. The stock market is never going to keep rising. You're never going to have a bull market forever.
Right.
Interest rates are never going to rise and never drop. The housing is never going to rise and never drop. It's always going to be a decline. Everything always works in cycles. So we know the down cycle is going to come. We know that. But if I do what the Bible says, when the down cycle comes, I may not get more money, but I won't lose money either.
Right.
I will just spend the money I have saved.
And then, which we'll maybe get into next week, is talk about how you can benefit from the downturn.
Everybody can, if you're positioned right.
If you're positioned right.
During the upturn.
Right.
You're absolutely true. And so, but anyway, yeah, I think that's we probably could run about 5 series.
Oh yeah.
5 talks in this series, and with great examples of how God can make a way for you. And one of these series, I'm gonna say, it needs to be. We need to also help people to focus on the idea that, as the rapper said, more money can mean more problems.
Oh yeah.
And that there's a concept in the Bible that says that I've learned to be content. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, is my purpose on this earth just to get more things? Or is my purpose on this earth to make the earth a better place? And so if that's driving you, it also changes how you think about trying to always gain wealth, But anyway, I think we got a good point there.
Yes. So stay tuned for next week, and we'll come again with part 3 of our series. Thank you so much for joining us this week. I'm your host, C.D. Baker. Till next time.